Hello music lovers, welcome back to the channel. As you can probably hear from my speaking voice, it's feeling a bit tired this week. I'm not going to give you any cover versions this week. I'm recovering. Had a little bit of a cold over the weekend, and I had to sing through it, 3 different gigs, and yeah, just it's not ready yet, and I've got 3 more wedding gigs this weekend, and I want to rest my voice for them. It's on its way back, but not quite back yet, so I decided to do something different. I thought today we'd have a wee debate, as you've probably read in the thumbnail, about 2 of the world's most amazing piano singer-songwriters. I would argue actually not 2 of the best, but the 2 best. Honourable mentions, of course, to guys like Jimmy Webb and Ray Charles and Alicia Keys, and there are so many other greats. I might also upset some folk by not adding in Stevie Wonder, but I feel like Stevie's more, he's keyboards and big production and other instruments more so than a straight up piano man as such. So anyway, I decided it was Billy versus Elton. I think it's a debate that's been had a million times. As always with these types of conversation, it's a bit of fun. Like all art, I have to point out that the best is, completely subjective. It's down to personal opinion. So there isn't really a definitive answer. But for a bit of fun, I wanted to look at what separates these 2 guys and what they have in common and what they have over one another. It's a debate that I've had with many friends over the years. Long car journeys to Italy and through Europe, and we would always have debates on something. And often it was music. And this is one that used to come up quite often with a couple of different pals. Sometimes get a bit heated as well because we're all very assured in our supporting of one side or the other. I think I'm going to try to be very fair. I love them both, so it's very easy for me to be fair with it. Both artists arrived in the music industry around about the same time. They're around about the same age. I think they both released their first albums very end of the 1960s and the early 70s, with both, I would say, releasing most of their best work sort of throughout the 70s, although they had some other great works after that as well. Both are piano playing singer-songwriters. Billy was from America, but was hugely inspired by the Beatles and a lot of other British acts and bands. And then Elton John was from Britain, but was hugely inspired by Americana and blues and a lot of music from the States. So it's quite funny when you think about it. But there are a lot more similarities, even with the differences in their inspirations, because I think they were both inspired by a lot of the same people as well, especially piano players. When it comes to objective points, as I said earlier, there aren't really many in music, but we can look at numbers. I suppose we can look at numbers. Record sales is a bit of an ambiguous one these days because everyone has turned to streaming. So it's difficult to... I'm sure the streaming numbers get added in now in some way and it's quantified in a different way. But yeah, the figures say that Billy has sold 150 million records worldwide, which is just like an incredible amount. But Elton John sold 300 million, so double Billy. So quite impressive numbers from both of them. It's just incredible. Elton released 31 albums to Billy's 13. Elton John's music is charted for over 800 weeks in the UK singles chart and over 1,400 weeks in the UK albums chart, with Billy's numbers being nowhere near that amount. Elton John has had 9 number 1 singles in the US and 10 number 1 singles in the UK, whereas Billy has had 3 number 1 singles in America and only 1 in the UK, which was Uptown Girl, if you're wondering, and a great pop song, great song. So when it comes to numbers, Elton is on a different level completely. Elton wins that round. If this is a boxing match with rounds, Elton's won round one. I think that much is non-debatable because we're talking numbers. So he's more popular, he's sold more, he's done more. But let's dive into the subjectives, which are the ones that we'll all debate in the comments, I'm sure, and people will get annoyed with me for saying certain things, and that's just how it goes, every time I do one of these types of video. What makes a great songwriter? I think the first gripe that anyone on the Billy camp, Billy's kind of fan base, if you're on Billy's side, the gripe they will have with Elton is that he didn't write the lyrics to any of his songs, and that is a big one. I think some people confuse this, though, with melody. Because he didn't write the lyrics, some people say, he didn't write the songs, he just wrote the piano parts. No, he wrote the melodies, he wrote the bit you sing along to, Elton wrote, he just didn't write the words. So, and I'll explain that in a minute. So, I don't know, do you consider someone a great songwriter because they write great music? Or do you have to be a great lyricist as well? It's a great question. I'm a real lyrics guy. I love lyrics. I love artists like Paul Simon and Don McLean and Sting and Bruce Springsteen and Billy Joel and all sorts of other artists who write really incredible lyrics that tell a story and all that stuff, and I do love the idea that a songwriter has come up with a narrative that's been sort of inspired by a time in their life, and then they create a song from that story, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, and it's how I write songs, albeit not any famous ones, but that's how I always write songs as well. I always take it from like a personal, or maybe even just inspired by somebody else's story, but I like to take a story and turn it into a nice poem of some sorts that then has music added to it, and it turns it into this beautiful thing. So I do think that's very important. But then on the flip side, I would still consider many artists great songwriters, even if they only wrote instrumental music or if their lyrics weren't great, as long as the songs were amazing. Although I do prefer when the lyrics are also, deep, man. So, and going back to what I was talking about with Elton John and using poems. So I used, Bernie Taupin was the poet behind most of Elton John's songs, almost, 90+% of them. There were a few other songwriters over the years that he worked with, but I think Elton's ability to take Bernie Taupin's poems and turn them into songs is also an act of genius in itself. And let's not gloss over the fact that Bernie Taupin is one of the best lyricists in pop history. I mean, just an incredible poet, incredible pop lyric writer. But I think you'd have to say Billy wins this round over Elton from this department, purely because he writes his own words. I think that's really important, and not just any old words. Billy's ability to write stunning lyrics, that connect with many different societal issues and scenarios is a thing of, absolute beauty. So a point to Billy from that point of view. The fact that he writes his own lyrics is a one-up, They're both amazing pianists. If we go to piano playing ability, I don't think there's really any point in going into, this category too deep, because I think Billy Joel once said in an interview that Elton John's piano skills were in a different league and that he was blown away by Elton's playing. But I also think Billy was being very modest there, because I think when you get to the level that they're both at, which is a level that I can only ever dream of, I think it's impossible to really tell, or to set them apart. The only thing I would say is that when you listen to Billy Joel playing live, he mostly sticks to the original parts that he wrote for the tracks when he recorded them, and he doesn't deviate much from that. Elton improvises a lot on the arrangements. He'll play the songs different every night, which I think makes it really interesting. And as a live performance, I think that's a wee bit more exciting for the listener. But yeah, I would say it's probably a draw in this section. They're both amazing piano players. It's very, very hard to split that. Vocally, I would say, I would say the same. In my opinion, I would say Elton is a better singer than Billy, for sure. But I wouldn't say that he's much, much better. I think as a fellow singer, as someone who's sung both of their songs, probably every one of the songs they've both ever written, and performed them at points throughout my career, and as somebody who's been coaching singers for about 20 years now as my job, I would say that when I work on songs with singers, if they're Billy Joel or Elton John songs, the students struggle a lot more with Elton John songs. Probably much more than they would imagine they would before they tackle them. Even the ballads and things, you think of like songs like Rocket Man or Tiny Dancer, and you think, oh, I could sing that's quite easy. Then you go to sing it, and then you realise that there's quite a lot of intricate, like, technical skill going on in Elton John's performances that most listeners probably wouldn't realise until they tried to sing one of his songs. He definitely had a better natural voice from the beginning, whereas Billy's voice, I would say, improved over the years. Billy's voice got, it really improved. Elton's probably declined a little bit, and then obviously there was the point where he'd been sort of doing too many drugs and too many tours and all that debaucherous nonsense, and he had the nodules, and he had to get an operation, and so Elton's voice at that point in the 80s definitely took a bit of, it was kind of late 80s, early 90s, I think, took a bit of a dip, and then definitely like got better, although he never ever managed to refine the head voice, just because of the way the surgery went, which is really sad. It was definitely a very big part of his sound, a really recognisable part of his sound. Billy and he, I would say now Elton's the one who's still got a better voice now than Billy. Billy's voice is really starting to deteriorate. To be fair, they're both like, I think, nearly 80, so after years and years of gigging and playing, it's fair enough. How many sports people can still do like use their muscles in the same way they could when they were in their 20s and 30s. But yeah, Billy's voice got better and better. I think he got some coaching and things like that over the years, and by the time he released An Innocent Man, I would say that was Billy Joel's voice at his absolute peak. His vocal on that track and that album is sensational. However, Elton was much more of a versatile singer throughout his career, as long as you leave out, as I said, the few years where he had to get the nodule surgery. They're both amazing singers. I would say both very underrated singers. They're not spoken of that often when you talk about the greatest singers of all time. They're always in the songwriter category. And I think when you're so good at performing, playing, songwriting, it's very easy for people to almost forget about the quality of the singing from both of these guys. So yeah, they were right near the top for many years as singers as well. And I think Elton takes a half point because I think he is a better singer, but I think both, it's a close one. They're both very, very good. Volume of work. More doesn't mean better, but Elton has released nearly 600 songs in his career compared to Billy's 122. So there is a huge gulf in those numbers. Billy Joel's fans will say that it's about quality over quantity, and I would somewhat agree. Although writing 600 songs is still something to be marvelled. And there's still a hell of a lot of quality in there from Elton. It's not like it's all quantity and no quality. There's so much quality. And I would add in on that subject matter that there were a couple of years in the 70s where Elton was releasing 3 albums a year, which is just nuts. I don't think there's ever been an artist or band in history that's released that many albums in that short space of time before. It's incredible. And if we look at quality other than the numbers which I stated before, it does all become fairly subjective. I would say that Elton has written in many more styles than Billy. Most of his songs tend to be ballads, jazz-influenced pop, soul, some classical. There was a little bit of doo-wop in there at points as well. Forgive me if I've missed any. Whereas Elton has written in all of those styles, plus put out dance records, funk tracks, glam rock, disco, gospel, Americana, country. He collaborated with rappers and DJs. He's definitely a more well-rounded writer when it comes to different styles and working with different artists, for sure. And again, that might not be how you guys that are watching define a great songwriter. So, but it's worth mentioning. I thought that it's, he definitely covered more styles. Performance as a performer, Elton is for sure the better performer. I don't think there's really I don't think there's any debate there. I think Elton put on a show. You know, crazy outfits, huge sets, wild performances were his signature. In his prime, he used to climb up and jump off his piano and all that kind of stuff. And some people don't love all that stuff and they find it a bit OTT and they prefer, you know, Billy's slightly less OTT performances when he does his live tours and concerts, which I can appreciate. But he also, you know, Elton also had the chops just to sit down at the piano just like Billy did without all the extra madness and just perform, which I've seen as well. In fact, on that point, I remember years ago when I got my first job working, I was washing pots in a restaurant whilst trying to make it as the next Billy or Elton. And my boss, who was the head chef, Jimmy at the time, Jimmy was a huge music fan. He just loved music. There was music on in the kitchen all day, every day. We talked about music all the time. And all of us in the kitchen at that point were just obsessed with music. It was great. There was loads of wannabe musicians and rock stars and loads of chefs that just loved music. So it was great. And he used to go to so many gigs. He was older than me by, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years at the time. And I remember he just had been to so many different concerts and things over the years. And I remember asking him what the best gig he ever went to was. Now, bearing in mind, he'd been to see Prince, he'd been to see Michael Jackson at his peak, he'd been to see loads of different bands, like famous bands. He'd been to see everybody. And I remember he said to me the best concert he ever went to was Elton John live at Edinburgh Castle. And he said when he turned up, he was expecting to see the Elton John band, he was expecting to see Nigel Lawson and Dee Murray and Davy Johnson and all that, and a big huge stage set up, and he was all excited. Maybe Elton would walk out and dressed as Donald Duck, and it was just a piano on the stage, and apparently Elton John walked out, just him, no band, no nothing. And I think Jimmy was a bit disappointed at first for the first 10, 15 minutes. And then he said that he just sang for about 3 hours, just a guy on a piano singing. And just hit after hit after hit after hit. And he said it's the best concert he ever went to. So again, I think performance-wise, Elton he can do all the crazy big performance stuff where he really glams it up with the big platforms and the silly glasses and all that stuff. But he can also just, fill a stadium with people and just play piano to them and sing, which is incredible. So yeah, I think performance-wise, I don't think we can really debate that it's not Elton. I think he's the best from the two of them. For me, let's get to my own experience. I think I love playing songs from both of them. They are some of the most fun songs to play and sing at a piano. I'm not sure I can really do either of them justice on the piano. Hopefully vocally I can, but as a piano player, they're just both incredible. And they're really challenging to play the parts and sing, and it's just, over the years I've really enjoyed playing both of their songs. Whilst playing at hundreds of nights in piano bars when I was younger, and then thousands now or well over 1,000, 1,300 weddings that I've played or something like that over the last 16, 17 years. Elton is far more requested than Billy in my experience. That could be because I'm in the UK, and maybe it would be different if I was in the US or another country where maybe Billy's more popular than Elton. I would say here I get asked for Elton songs much more than I get asked for Billy Joel songs. They're both requested, don't get me wrong, but I would say when people request Billy songs from me, it's almost always the same 3 or 4. It's always Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, Always a Woman, New York State of Mind, and Piano Man, of course, Piano Man, which is like my song. That's my song. Sometimes I'll get asked for Vienna, which is actually my favourite Billy Joel song, and I love when I'm asked for Vienna, but it's rare. That's pretty much it. I don't think really anybody requests anything else. Whereas at almost every wedding that I play at, I'll get asked to play Your Song, Sacrifice, Rocket Man, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, Tiny Dancer, I'm Still Standing, Crocodile Rock, Can You Feel the Love Tonight, Benny and the Jets. I keep going and going and going. I think I'm always getting requests for lots of different Elton John songs, which I think also just shows you how big that library of songs that he has and the library of hits that he has. It's just, I think, yeah, and that's a big part of my decision, or my opinion on it. But the thing that takes it for me, the thing that it comes down to for me, and you can debate this in the comments. If I was to take the best 10 Elton John songs and the best 10 Billy Joel songs, or even the best 20 from each artist, because let's be honest, they've both got so many great songs. If I was to take the best 20 Billy Joel songs and the best 20 Elton John songs, I wouldn't be able to choose a side. I'd be looking at some of the best songs ever written. Okay, so I think I'd be looking at, I'd be looking at 40 of the greatest songs ever written. But yeah, and they're both phenomenal. As we keep going, the great Billy Joel songs would start to run out, and the Elton John songs would just keep going and going and going and going and going until it's not even a fight anymore. I think by the time we got to 40, 50 songs, I'm still looking at like absolutely incredible Elton John songs, whereas we're into some of Billy's not as great work. Until it's not even really a fight. I think, I know I said earlier on it wasn't about volume, but he just has so many incredible songs, probably more than any artist in pop history. I mean, I don't know. In the comments, name me an artist who has had more, household name songs, recognisable songs from, if you went to somebody's house and you stuck on a bunch of songs. How many artists have got more household name songs in their repertoire than Elton John? The Beatles and Queen could potentially come close, but I think Elton would still win, again, because of the volume. He's just got so many songs, and it's not just so many okay songs. There are, yes, don't get me wrong, it's not all perfect. There are a few Elton John albums from the 80s that have some awful stuff on them. Sorry, Elton, I'm sorry. And I think Elton would agree. Stuff that he released when he was on far too many drugs and his quality control dropped. Things like the Leather Jackets album. The Leather Jackets album, there's maybe 2 good songs on that. The rest's pretty bad. Pretty bad for Elton. Maybe another artist that would still be good, but it's definitely not his best stuff. There are a couple of albums from around about that time that aren't great. There's a couple of great songs on the album, and then the rest of it's real filler. And you could just tell that he wasn't in a good place in his life, and that's fair enough. But there are still far too many songs in the genius category for me, for him not to take the crown on this debate. It's the performances, the flawless albums, some of the flawless albums from the 70s. The branding with all the kind of cartoon art, like Captain Fantastic, The Brown Dirt Cowboy, and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and all of those albums. He was more iconic than Billy. He's just a more iconic guy. When you see the kind of Elton John artwork from the 70s, it almost sums up an era. It sums up an era in music history, But listen, they're both absolutely incredible. I mean, we could talk about some of the insane songs from both artists. I'd love to just go on and on and on. I'd probably bore you forever on, just making a list of all of the great songs from both of them that I love. But I think Elton takes it. There are just too many incredible songs of Elton's not to win this debate. But both amazing, both great. What do you guys think? Please let me know if you agree, disagree, if you have any points you think I've missed. I'm sure lots of you will be upset and offended that I didn't pick Billy. Lots of you will agree with me on Elton. Let me know what you think. As always, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully next week I'll be back with a couple of cover versions. I've got another episode of What Makes This Song Special to drop next week as well. I just need to record the cover version for it, but I've already done the video. It could be story, as always. Tune in next time. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.